Hey everybody, Milkman Al here. I just wanted to give you my final thoughts and a build guide for my League starter, which is a Blade Vortex and Tornado Cold Occultist. So overall, this build did really well. I was able to clear everything up through red maps, tier 16s, without too much problem. Clear speed is very good, and you can basically just walk through maps and destroy everything in your path. Single target damage is also fairly strong. Between Blade Vortex and Tornado, your single target's probably about 2.5 million, maybe up to 3 million. I designed this build and my Atlas tree to basically run Delirium as efficiently as possible, and it's very good at that. Even with a significant amount of Delirium on maps, you still pretty much just cruise through everything in the map and clear it with no problem. The issue with this build is that it is squishy against big hits. You are quite likely to be one-shot the way I have it built, and degens get you real bad. Degens are a huge weakness for this build because you're using petrified blood, so technically this is a low-life build, so you can get the extra 30% more damage from pain attunement. In all, I've got about 4 exalts of gear invested into this character, and so given that I've been able to fairly comfortably clear everything up through tier 16 maps, I would say that this is a pretty successful League starter. That said, like I mentioned, I'm a little squishy against true in-game content, so I wanted to move on to something else, and don't really want to put the huge amount of investment into this build that I think it would require to be a viable true in-game bosser for things like the Maven and Shaper Elder, stuff like that. Again, though, I definitely recommend this build. I think it was very effective to get you into and through in-game. It's a lot of fun to play. I do really enjoy it. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of this build, if you like this content, please drop me a subscription, follow me here. You can also catch me live on Twitch at twitch.tv/milkmanal1, Wednesdays and Sundays from 8 to 10 p.m. Central. I'd love to see you there. Alright, so first off, the skill tree. Like I mentioned, we're an occultist, so I took all the cold stuff, Void Beacon, Frigid Wake. Frigid Wake is actually a really, really nice defensive layer in combo with this node here, Chilling Presence. All nearby enemies are chilled, and this makes you take 10% reduced damage from hits from them, which is actually very nice. That helps survivability quite a lot. Not being able to be frozen and chilled is really good. And up here we've taken Forbidden Power, because we're going to be stacking power charges, and you get a whole bunch of extra area of effect from that, and it's also nice for generating power charges, and then Malediction for some extra damage dealt, and the extra curse. It's very helpful. Our curses in this are Assassin's Mark and Frostbite, which you get from a ring. So the order that you want to take these in is probably Void Beacon first, Frigid Wake, just so you can get all of your cold damage buffs up as quickly as possible, and get Can't Be Frozen ASAP, especially if you're doing this as your League starter. Subsequently, I took Forbidden Power since I didn't really see any way that I was going to be able to get a Frostbite ring anytime soon, so I just wanted to get the crit side of this build going as quickly as possible, and then I finished up with Malediction. So I will include leveling builds with this as well. If you watched my earlier video on how I'd planned to League start, I pretty much did exactly what I said I was going to. So I came up here first and got Wicked Ward, Eldritch Battery, and Mind Over Matter with all of the kind of life and energy shield nodes and stuff on the way. And that happens at about level 40-ish, something like that. So basically the core guts of this build are up and running very quickly. So contrary to what it looks like here, I actually worked my way down into the Scion area here so I could get this Potency of Will and get some skill effect duration. So if you've ever played a Blade Vortex build, you know that skill effect duration is a gigantic quality of life, and it helps so much to not have to recast Blade Vortex constantly. It's really, really nice, especially for leveling. And then once I was able to anoint exceptional performance, then I switched out of this and saved these points. Other than that little detour, the skills pretty much go as they look like. So I traveled over here, came up to the cold area here so I could get fizz damage converted to cold. And in conjunction with Rim Sorrows, that's really all the conversion that you need. I invested in all these spell block nodes, and then just sort of traveled down into the Templar area, got this staff cluster, got this cluster, and then towards the end, I invested in the cluster jewel stuff. So this cluster jewel setup actually adds a whole bunch of utility to the build. So with Thaumaphage, you hinder stuff, make it move slower, which is kind of a nice defensive layer, and also leech energy shield. And since you're Mind Over Matter with Eldritch Battery, courtesy of a Devouring Diadem, that's a nice way to basically just regenerate health. Seal Mender is the real reason that you want this, though, because 30% increased seal gain frequency is a huge quality of life benefit, and also ultimately ups your real damage output by making it much, much easier for you to maintain 10 stacks of Blade Vortex. And as mentioned, we have Chilling Presence here. So everything around you is chilled and deals 10% reduced damage because of Frigid Wake. And Blast Freeze, since you're critting a whole bunch, basically makes everything around you frozen all the time. And the extra cold damage helps, but it's mostly here for the freeze prolif. So as you can probably see, there's a whole bunch of optimization to be done with this tree. You got a bunch of 2-point jewels that are basically unrealized here, 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 in fact. You could do another cluster jewel here. Crit chance is probably your best bet, but honestly, I think you're better off just using your tree at this point, getting the extra jewels, getting the crit multi here, because this build is a little light on crit multi at 429. Not terrible, but also could use improvement. Another area that might be nice for improvement is using an inspired learning here. That will actually save you a couple points, because you can spec out of this node here, and then also you can pick up Discord Artisan, and since you're running 2 heralds, and we'll talk about skills in just a second, this actually gives you a pretty hefty damage bonus for just 1 point. What's more is you could also use a Thread of Hope with a large radius here and capture this node, save yourself a point by specking here to get this cold mastery, and that would also allow you to pick up this energy shield node and faster casting here, which is not a huge benefit, but it's certainly helpful. And you can get blast radius as well. As for skills, obviously we're running Blade Vortex. That's the main killing skill for the build. Tornado is also very useful for an additional single target damage boost, and it's also nice for things that you need to kite that'll kind of take you down in one hit. Like I mentioned, the build's pretty squishy against degens and like big accurate one hits. So if you need to drop a tornado and just kind of like run around something, then do it. It's pretty useful, pretty easy to do, because tornado actually does a lot of damage. I only have it on a 4-link actually. As you can see here, it does about 150,000 DPS, but that isn't really accurate because it hits every quarter second, so it's probably more like 500,000 or maybe a little bit less than that as it stands, and that's on a 4-link. So if you activate these 2 links here, you know, you multiply that by 4, it's probably more like 700,000 extra damage. So that actually makes a really big difference to your single target. And since it homes in on stuff, it's basically always going to be hitting. Other things, I self-cast Assassin's Mark. I feel like that's by far the easiest way to do it. Anything that you're actually going to want to mark is going to have the mark the entire time it's alive, which should be, you know, compared to most other things, a while. So not a big deal. Herald of Purity gives you some nice minions to sort of shield you and give you a little time to kind of run away if you need to. Herald of Ice, you get some occasional chain freezes and shatters, which is great for clear, even though the clear for this build is already fine. Frostbomb, I also self-cast Frostbomb, though ideally you probably want to link that to cast when damage taken, just to reduce the amount of buttons that the build has. But this is, again, a nice sort of debuff for tough targets. Movement, I use Flame Dash. I have Steel Skin on left click because this build basically has 0 physical mitigation, so it needs something, and that's, again, a big weakness of it. And I have Frostbite on a ring. So in terms of gear, my weapon's a Dusk Dawn. It's just an awesome all-around crit staff, and it allows me to spec into block. You'll notice down here I have 66 chance to block and 35 spell block. That is without glancing blows. So all of that damage is prevented. So pretty good block chance on the build, all things considered. Devouring Diadem is nice. It unlocks Eldritch Battery and also gives you a huge amount of regen, while simultaneously letting you run a whole bunch of extra auras because of its reservation efficiency. Other than that, I just have all life, ES chest, Rimsars for cold conversion. I have these boots, which are really, really nice with the Eldritch Implicits on them. Those turned out exceptionally well. I got very lucky with those. and the enchant for that matter. The amulet's mostly just for a bunch of dexterity. This build is pretty starved for dex and also needs a little extra strength. So I chose to use my amulet mostly for stats. Rings, just have some life gain for enemy hit by spells. This build hits a ton, so this is actually a really important piece of like sustainability and regen for you. 14 life per hit doesn't seem like a whole lot, but if you swap over here to Blade Vortex, you see that it hits 7.5 times a second when it's at 10 blades. So that's what, 100 and some life a second, just kind of thrown in there. And when you're functioning with 2,000 life, that's a lot. That's a whole lot of extra life just kind of thrown back into it. One thing I did not mention is we have life leech from anomalous Blade Vortex. That's another very important part of the sustain for this build. So between Mind Over Matter, the life leech from anomalous Blade Vortex, and the life gain on hit here, you're actually very durable. So like unless you get degen to death or just smacked down by something huge, you hardly ever die. But unfortunately, those things tend to happen a whole bunch with all of the burning tar and random, area degens that the League mechanic offers for you. And belt, just stats resists, nothing super flashy there. Ideally, you would want Itziri's Promise and Taste of Hate for some extra fizz conversion and extra bonus damage. I basically just chose not to optimize this character. I will post my current character in addition to kind of an optimized build, so you sort of have a better idea of what a top end look would be for this. I thought I was gonna push hard into the endgame, and I bought this Watcher's Eye for an exalt, but you do not need this. This is just purely for the final 10% of fizz to cold conversion. It's not necessary for the build. I think if you take it off, you lose like 10% of your damage. Yeah, not even that. It's like 80,000, so that's definitely not necessary. But one thing a Watcher's Eye can let you do is get rid of this. So if you want to not spec into this part of the tree for whatever reason, you want more defenses, which is not a bad idea, or you just want more damage from somewhere else, you can do that. So yeah, that's my build. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I really did enjoy this build, but I don't think it's particularly viable for the extreme in-game content. That said, it will carry you very nicely up through tier 16 maps. It clears very fast. It's very efficient for what I wanted it to do, which is clear Delirium maps efficiently. I have no complaints. I thought it was very fun to build. It's just kind of crapping out at the very end of the game, so I decided to go with something different, which is a Stormburst Inquisitor, and I'll make a guide for that eventually when I'm finished with it. But hopefully you enjoyed this talk. I will have Path of Buildings for leveling for this character, the current character, and optimized tree in the description, so check that out. Also, again, don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow me 8 to 10 p.m. Central Time on twitch.tv/milkmanout1. Links are all in the description as well. So again, thank you for watching. Have a good one.